All right, hey guys, it's Jank, and I want to talk to you about a story I saw in the New York Times and how it relates to proving that mainstream media is a cult as well, right? So there are a lot of cults out there. There's a QAnon cult. There's a lot of things you can call a cult. I think mainstream media is one of them, and I'm going to try to prove that to you here in this article related to current day politics. Okay, but before we do that, always a shout out to our sponsors for the live videos, aspiration.com/TYT. If you have your money in a traditional bank, they're using your money for investments. They make a lot of money off of your money, and one of the investments they make is oil companies, gas companies. They also make investments in private prisons. I hate that. That's your money going towards those industries. Aspiration doesn't do any of that. It keeps your money clean. They're progressive. The minimum wage there is $25. They did that voluntarily. And you get the best rates, the best interest rates by a lot. So check it out at aspiration.com/TYT. Later, we'll have a link in the description box. You should always check the description box as well. All right. So David Leonhardt wrote a piece for the New York Times asking the 5 reasons why Manchin did not vote for the Build Back Better and decided to kill it instead. And by the way, guys, if you're members, I see you as well because you got the TYT in the chat, the little emblem logo. And so if you become a member by hitting the join button below, I'll try to give you a shout out. And if you use Super Chat, I'll try to give you a shout out. And we appreciate everyone later using Super Thanks. Okay, so he's trying to figure out the 5 reasons why. Now, you're going to be shocked to find out that money in politics and legalized bribery isn't one of them. He's got it about a quarter right here. And so, you know me, I always give credit where credit is due. And I'm not looking to say, oh, it's David Leonhardt's fault, etc. That's how you pronounce his name. He's just representative of how the New York Times thinks, how the mainstream media thinks. He's not any better or worse. This is very standard fare stuff. And I just use it as an example of the type of article I read nonstop, about 100 a day, right, of these same kinds of articles, which is both a form of brainwashing in and of itself, and is also the result of brainwashing because they're in a cult and they don't realize it. So the 5 possible reasons, I'm not going to get into it with too much detail because that's not the point. The point is to get to the real reason. So he says, number 1, you could take it at face value that he was worried about spending and inflation and deficits. There's a 0% chance that's true because we had all those same issues before when he was authorizing trillions of dollars to go to corporations. In COVID relief bill, he didn't have any problem with the Federal Reserve printing a couple of $1 trillion. If you were concerned about inflation, your hair would be on fire about quantitative easing. And by the way, if you challenge writers like David Leonhardt, my guess is that he is reasonably intelligent, and he would go, well, that's a good point about quantitative easing, and that is weird why Manchin and all the Republicans and all the other politicians that say they're concerned about inflation didn't actually care about the number one cause of inflation by a lot. That's weird, isn't it? See, that's why I can prove to you that Manchin and other politicians' stated reasons are lies, that they make no logical sense at all. And now there is one part of it that's true. That's why I say I give a quarter credit here, because there's a smattering of things that are right in these 5 reasons. He says, well, it just might be philosophical when he says that he thinks these, benefits for the American people and for the voters of West Virginia are just too generous. Like he, again, never said that it was too generous when we spent trillions on the most profitable corporations in the world. When we handed that money to them, not too generous, did not create an entitlement way of thinking. But when you give it to average Americans, it creates an entitlement mindset. In fact, Manchin said that, quote, I cannot accept our economy or basically our society moving towards an entitlement mentality. Again, absurd. The people who feel most entitled are the corporations that send their lobbyists in and extract billions and sometimes literally trillions of dollars from the biggest piggy bank in the world. That's the United States government. That's not an entitlement complex, according to Manchin, every politician. And by the way, and this is the important part, every reporter, no reporter thinks that's entitlement complex. They've never written an article saying, look at how the corporations feel that they're entitled to all the money that we print and give to them. That's outrageous. No, No, entitlement complex is only when it is related to you guys, the average American, right? And by the way, they'll use it in the context sometimes of things you're actually literally entitled to. They're like, oh, Social Security and Medicare, oh, those are entitlements. You know, when you feel entitled. Yeah, we put money into Social Security and Medicare out of our paychecks, out of every single paycheck of our lives. You're goddamn right we're entitled to it because it's actually literally our money. Whereas the money that corporations get, whether it's through the Treasury or the Federal Reserve, they're not at all entitled to. They just take it because they're more powerful than us. And people like Manchin are the ones that helped them. All right. So then the second one, he says, is class consciousness. And look, here I'm glad he's bringing up things that the press never brought up before. I told you he's a quarter right. The press in the past has been 0% right. They do articles. They wouldn't even mention that Manchin is rich or his donors are rich or that he hangs out with rich people. But here he says, look, he might just relate. He says Manchin is a rich man and he spends a lot of time with other rich people. And she mentions that his daughter was the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. Whoa, look at this. This is because other establishment Democrats are fighting back against Manchin. So it gives the New York Times permission to mention his daughter, to mention his coal company, which this writer does later. It's clear they have been given permission. Before they were given permission, when Manchin was only fighting progressives, the New York Times and other outlets, with some notable exceptions, including a reporter I'm going to call out in a second, but almost never mentioned his daughter, his son who runs the coal company, his $5 million that we reported on that he made in the last 10 years from his own coal company. So that prohibition has been lifted a little bit. So they're now dancing around the edges of the truth. But I don't know if it feels uncomfortable, like, oh, we just said something that's true and is slightly against one of the elites, but the other elites gave us permission. You think it's okay? Yes, it's okay, David. So I'm glad you at least got that right. And they mentioned that he used to be part of ALEC, that's the American Legislative Exchange Council. That's the brazen attempt by the Chamber of Commerce to just have their own pawns, politicians who say, yeah, I will do anything the donors say, anything at all. Now, that's not how the New York Times frames it, but at least they explained that he was an ALEC. It's not bad. So I'm not ripping this thing apart. I'm giving you guys the upsides of it too. But then they always ruin it. And now when they get into, he says, reason for that on this, he said, well, he did agree to an increase in the corporate tax only to have Kristen Sinema kill that provision. Otherwise, Manchin was in favor of raising taxes on the wealthy and corporations. Man, that means you don't know anything about politics. You think that the donors don't know Manchin's saying no to this provision and Sinema's saying no to this provision. And by the time you're done, hey, look at that. They just happen to say no to all of the provisions, but Manchin gets to say, oh, I was for taxing the wealthy. And Sinema gets to say, oh, I was for lowering drug prices. Golly gee, neither one of them happened because we both blocked them. High five. Come on, you're a New York Times reporter. You don't know that? He genuinely seems to not know that. Okay, that's amazing to me. All right, and that's going to get to the cult. So let me hurry through the rest of it so I can get to the main explanation. So he says climate and coal. They mention his coal company. That's amazing. And again, used to never happen, but I think is actually, even through our reporting, I think it's a small factor. I think the money in politics is a larger factor, but they basically come out to the same thing because it's money. So I'll get back to that too. My shout out to the good reporting is Jonathan Weissman, who's done a number of good stories about money in politics for the New York Times, which is very rare. That's why every time I read it, I'm like, whoa, it's like 1 out of 200 stories, 1 out of 2,000 stories that actually mentions something that is true. His latest on Manchin was with Lisa Friedman, and they did a really good job on that. So I don't dislike the New York Times for the sake of disliking the New York Times. It doesn't make any sense. I wish they were right all the time. They were more factual and more objective all the time, then I'd give them more credit like I am right now. But here, the only mention of money in politics, it's not at all mentioned in the story. Yeah, he mentions coal companies and the daughter and all that stuff, and the fact that Manchin is rich, but he doesn't talk about the donations, which are legalized bribes. The only reference is go read Weissman and Friedman's story in another link, but he doesn't even mention, he mentions fossil fuel ties, but doesn't mention money in politics or campaign contributions. There is no mention of that in the entire article. Reason number 4, he says Democratic disarray. This is the one is the most hilarious and the one that everybody's talking about now, where they say, oh, Manchin's feelings were hurt. And since they protested him at his mansion and his yacht and his Maserati, well, obviously that's unacceptable. And if the feelings of the elite are hurt, they should vote against the interest of their voters. And by the way, that is not noted at all in the story. They just stated, and every story I've read now, over a dozen stories, and they view Manchin saying my feelings were hurt as a very good reason why he should kill the bill. They don't say like that's absurd. Don't you care about your voters? Aren't you supposed to represent them? There's a higher minimum wage, which is an earlier issue. Does that help or hurt your voters? Who cares about your effing feelings? No reporter says that. Isn't that amazing? I know Dave Weigel once said it at the Washington Post. I was like, hey, look at that, right? No, but here, New York Times, as usual, writes it as, well, I mean, if his feelings were hurt by progressives, obviously he should destroy his own voters' lives. Now, they don't say that sentence, but that's the implication. Like, it's a perfectly legitimate reason to vote no. And then finally, performative politics, that it plays well in West Virginia. And his theory is that maybe they're going to get something done anyway at the end, because Biden said something in a press conference about, me and Manchin are working on it. And then we know what's going to happen to Biden, and he's going to get a deal with Manchin, and the cinema's going to say no. And he's going to be like, what? Because there's a decent chance that Joe Biden has no idea what's going on in politics. It never has. He always his main claim to fame is, what's the worst offer Mitch McConnell will give me? Okay, good, I'll take it. That's his entire career defined, okay? So here, he's looking for the worst offer, and now Manchin's messing with him and going, psych, I'm taking away the worst offer. I just made it worse. Look, it's so funny how we play with this guy. Okay, yeah, now you and I have a deal. Cinema Christie, you go in there. And then the cinema goes, worst deal. Biden's chasing. So that's how that's going to work, okay? And they might never get a deal because of that. By the way, even if he got Manchin in cinema, then some other ass like Menendez is going to pop up and go, I don't want lower drug prices. I get paid by the drug companies. Okay, which gets me to my point. Guys, giant article, 5 different possible reasons for why Manchin might be doing it. And millions of dollars that he took in campaign contributions, not even mentioned. That's apparently not plausible that it would affect him. See, this is an important analogy. It's a sports analogy, so stay with me if you don't care about football. But Packers and Cowboys, you'll get it. Packers and Cowboys are both good teams this year, right? My theory is that the Packers are better than the Cowboys, right? But if you have a theory that the Cowboys are better, that's not crazy. I think you're wrong, but I might be wrong. You know, and I have a 65% chance of being right, but it doesn't matter. We're in the ballpark, right? So you're not at all crazy for thinking that the Cowboys might be better than the Packers, right? So if they said, hey, you know what? Money in politics, he got millions and millions of dollars in campaign contributions from fossil fuel companies. That might be one of the factors that affects him. And in fact, that's probably one of the larger factors that affects him. But we're not sure. It could also be performative politics. It could also be he genuinely means it. It could be this, could be that. Oh, here's some polling in West Virginia, and that might have affected him. That wouldn't be crazy. I would say that they're wrong. I think money in politics is at least 90% of the equation. It makes almost every other factor irrelevant. But we can have a reasonable conversation around that and around what percentages should be. But if you say, no, I think the Yankees can win the Super Bowl, I would say to you, the Yankees don't play football. They play baseball. That's not possible. And if you insist on it, I'd start to slowly back out of the room because I'd realize, oh, this person is not mentally well. They need help, right? So both in this article and in mass, the entire mainstream media has said, no, we don't think millions of dollars handed to politicians by corporations, which is critical to those politicians retaining their power. We don't think it's at all relevant. We don't think it's 1% relevant. We think it's 0% relevant. Well, no, that's crazy. You'd have to be nuts to believe that. So do you think it's secretly, you think it's 55% relevant, but then you never report on it? Well, that would be a weird choice, wouldn't that? That's even worse. That's conspiratorial. Like, oh no, we know that's what you. Of course, you guys are right. It's millions of dollars. You think they're not affected by that? Now, look, every person watching this video, right wing, left wing, middle, it doesn't matter at all. You all, every single one of you, knows that. Of course, millions of dollars matters to those politicians. That's how they get reelected. That's the source of their power, and it's an enormous amount of money that would sway almost any human being. Even if you're out there and you're a wonderful person and you walk with Christ and, you know, God, you care about others and you spend, somebody says, hey, here's $2 million. That's going to affect you a little bit. That's good. And for most people, it's going to affect you a lot. But the entire mainstream media in America says, no, it doesn't affect them at all. Well, okay, that's a cult. You're in a cult and you don't know it, because that's an absurd proposition, so absurd, you'd have to lose your mind to believe that. And so you could claim their best defense is, we think, well, look, if it's around 50%, then obviously we should write it in every article, and we never do. So that's conspiratorial, and I don't want you thinking that I'm part of corporate rule and I intended it. And which, by the way, I don't believe that is the case for them. But they could admit that, and that would be amazing. But likely they're not going to, so it has to be another option. First of all, though, Pitchfork's Dragon and Dallin Faulkner, thank you for the super chats. We appreciate it. I love doing this show with you guys. But if it's not a giant factor, then they have to say, well, it's such a small factor. That's why we never mentioned it in any of the articles. We never mentioned it on cable news. It's because it's such a small factor that it's not worth even mentioning. It's under 5%. It's a tiny, millions of dollars for every one of these politicians is a tiny, tiny factor, so small that it's not worthy of even talking about. It's not news that's fit to print. Well, again, literally every single person watching this video thinks that's insane. And yet, it is not just one writer at the New York Times. It's almost every writer at the New York Times, with the exception of Jonathan Weissman. We're fair. Okay. And it's not just one paper. It's every paper and every television station and every radio station. It's every part of mainstream media says, whatever you do, do not focus on the largest factor in politics. That's a cult. And now the problem is, last thing, guys, is that cult is super effective and it's incredibly sophisticated. That cult is so good, it has convinced some of the smartest, most educated people in this country. In fact, almost all of them. If you go to someone who is a professional, a lawyer, a doctor, et cetera, in finance, et cetera, they all believe this. And if you say to them, no, the New York Times is not being honest with you, they're not covering actually the single most important factor in politics, they think you're nuts. They're like, get a load of this guy. He thinks that Jesus doesn't walk on water. He thinks there's no shaitan. Of course there's a Satan, and he has a pitchfork and a tail. And look, I'm using religion. I'm sorry if you're religious out there, but it's obviously mythology. But we could use other mythology, right? He doesn't think Thor throws lightning from the sky. Idiot! Well, no. I hate to break it to you. You're like tons and tons of really smart people. And that's why this is the most effective cult in the world. They've tricked the smartest people into thinking that it's sacrilege. The New York Times is like their Bible. It's whenever I say the New York Times is not actually being honest with you, they're like, oh, they're taken aback by it. They're like, wait, has this guy lost his mind? New York Times is Jesus. It's God itself. It's all the news that's fit to print. How could you question? But wait, do you want to hear my evidence on why I think it's wrong? No, I don't want to even hear it. You must be crazy, right? Okay, then for all those professionals out there, good, smart, educated folks. By the way, Andrew Singh left his best. Thank you, guys. For all of those professionals out there, okay, do you think money in politics is not relevant? Do you think millions, when Manchin and Cinema and others get literally millions of dollars in campaign contributions, both the ones we can see, and that's why I know it's in the millions, and then the dark money, which is even larger, when they get that money, do you really believe Manchin, Cinema, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, it's bipartisan, completely bipartisan, okay? All those people are not at all affected by those millions of dollars. Now, if you work in finance, for example, you're a professional that works in finance, you know that's the most absurd thing you've ever heard. Are people affected by millions of dollars they might get? Of course! The whole country is screaming in unison, of course! And yet, the only people that say that is not true, other than the ones who are corrupt and the ones that are corrupting them, obviously that's in their self-interest, I get that. But the only other ones outside of them that say, no, black is white and white is black, and it does millions of dollars does not affect people, are the ones that are supposed to be finding the news and reporting the news. They're reporters. It's their job to find out what's true and tell you. Oh my God, they're doing the exact opposite. So if you wonder how we got here, That's how we got here. And if you wonder why the right wing doesn't believe in mainstream media, that's why. And they're right. They just went in the wrong direction. They made one right decision. These guys are not telling the truth. And they had this instinct. These guys are with the people that are oppressing me, but they don't realize the people that are oppressing you are not brown or black or just cross the border with no money in their pocket. No, the people oppressing you is corporate rule. Your corporate overlords, basically, the oligarchs. Nazik Hook, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it. No, look, guys, when overlord and oligarchy, they sound a little conspiratorial. They sound, for the average person that's been brainwashed by mainstream media, it sounds like, it's a little radical, a little progressive and stuff. No, but what do you think the people that do all those campaign donations are? Do you think they're maybe poor? No, of course not. You think they're middle class? No, but by definition, they're not. No, they're largely either incredibly wealthy or corporations themselves and their executives. So do you think that the corporations might be self-interested, or do you think they're doing it out of charity? Again, no one believes they're doing it out of charity. If they're a real person, but every reporter in the country says, yes, they're doing it out of charity, and it has no effect on the brilliant, honest, and principled politicians. No, it's definitely a cult. All right. Last thing, Stephen Artis, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it. Although it says Cenk is a beta. Okay, that's other. I give this whole spiel of giving all these facts and logic, etc. Response, oh yeah, beta. I'm deeply amused by you guys. All right. Anyways, last thing is Too Strong Coffee. Okay. What a beautiful American-made mug made by a progressive woman here in America. Okay. TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. The Santa mug, the stocking stuffers, the giant 2-pound bags, all different flavors now, by the way, espresso, decaffeinated, etc. Up to $52 off. Rush there before they take away the Christmas specials. TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. Much love. 2:30, which is right about now. Interviews start. Nina Turner's got an interview on The Conversation, and then the main show at 3 o'clock. All right. See you guys.